Good evening, and it has finally happened. 2 days ago, right here in New York City, the Public Design Commission unanimously voted to remove a nearly 200-year-old statue of Thomas Jefferson from City Hall, meaning that our nation's first Secretary of State, the drafter of the Declaration of Independence, and the nation's third president has officially been canceled. Meanwhile, while everyone has been focusing on the FDA's approval of the Johnson & Johnson booster shot, well, something else has been at work behind the scenes. And that is, in order to limit their liability, as well as to protect their corporate assets, last week, Johnson & Johnson pulled a very interesting legal maneuver against the over 30,000 women who were suing them for causing ovarian cancer. Meanwhile, over in the city of San Francisco, where they have implemented a vaccine mandate for all restaurants, one restaurant, well, it's not complying. InNOut Burger has been temporarily shut down by the city because they refused to be what they called the government's vaccine police. And then lastly, the U.S. government has just launched a new $125 million project alongside Washington State University and about a dozen other countries in order to discover over 10,000 novel viruses in nature and then to test them to see whether they are infectious to humans. Actually, come to think of it, I think I've heard of a story like that before. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman, from the Epoch Times. And now let's begin today's discussion by talking about Johnson & Johnson. Now, while everyone has been discussing the Johnson & Johnson booster shot, and especially how great it is for their business, given the fact that in the last quarter alone, they raked in over $500 million in vaccine sales. However, there is another story regarding Johnson & Johnson that the media is largely ignoring. And that involves the legal maneuvering that they are currently involved in order to shield themselves from lawsuits which claim that their baby powder, as well as their other talc products, caused ovarian cancer as well as mesothelioma. Now, to give you a bit of background on these cases, to this very day, there have been tens of thousands of plaintiffs, largely women, who have alleged that Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, as well as their other talc products, they contain asbestos and they cause cancer. In fact, there was a Reuters investigation conducted all the way back in 2018, which found that Johnson & Johnson knew for decades that asbestos, which is of course a carcinogen, was lurking in their baby powder as well as in their other cosmetic talc products. And even though last year Johnson & Johnson stopped selling their baby powder here in the United States, to this very day, they maintain that they're innocent, that this whole cancer story is misinformation that's based upon unfounded allegations, and that their products are safe. However, regardless of their corporate stance, at this very moment, there are over 30,000 plaintiffs across the entire country, including women who are suffering from ovarian cancer, as well as people who are battling mesothelioma, who are in the process of suing Johnson & Johnson. And these legal challenges, they are having a real toll on the company. In fact, to this day, Johnson & Johnson has spent nearly $1 billion in legal fees, as well as another approximately $3.5 billion in financial settlements to these plaintiffs. However, in order to limit their liability, as well as to shield their corporate assets, well, last week, specifically on Thursday, Johnson & Johnson pulled a very, you can call it, interesting legal maneuver. It's something that's actually known as the Texas legal loophole, also known as the Texas two-step defense. And what they did was that Johnson & Johnson, they split themselves into two different companies, one of which is Johnson & Johnson, and the other one they called LTL Management LLC. And then what they did is that they moved the baby powder liabilities to this new company, and subsequently, they had this new company file bankruptcy, which means that all of the existing cases and the trials that are against this company are halted pending a bankruptcy settlement. Let me just repeat how all this played out just in case you didn't catch it. Johnson & Johnson, which is currently worth over $400 billion, was looking to shield the bulk of their assets from these lawsuits accusing them of causing cancer. That's because the plaintiffs were, of course, trying to sue the Johnson & Johnson firm itself. And so, in order to shield themselves and protect their corporate assets, they split themselves into two separate companies. On the one hand, you have Johnson & Johnson Consumer Incorporated. This is the parent company of such brands as Neutrogena, Band-Aid, Listerine, Splenda, Visine, Tylenol, etc. And then the second company is called LTL Management LLC, and that was the company that was given the baby powder products, the ones that are currently being sued. And then, right after this company was created, it filed for bankruptcy, meaning that not only are all of the lawsuits put on hold as the bankruptcy proceedings are going to be playing themselves out, which could take either months or years, but also the amount that these plaintiffs suffering from cancer can get is substantially less. That's because they are no longer suing the parent company, but rather a smaller subsidiary. And you might be asking yourself, what's the difference in the amount that these plaintiffs can actually go after now that Johnson & Johnson has pulled this legal maneuver? Well, consider this fact. Johnson & Johnson promised to fund LTL with at least $2 billion to be spread across the 34,600 claimants, meaning that out of the 34,600 lawsuits that are currently working their way through the courts, the max that these people can get collectively, meaning altogether, is $2 billion. Now, that might sound like a lot, but consider this. Earlier this year, in June, 22 women with ovarian cancer, they won their lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson, and they were awarded $2.12 billion in damages. That was just one lawsuit with 22 women, and the damages there were $2.12 billion. However, after this new legal maneuver, the remaining over 34,000 women will all have to collectively share $2 billion. That is quite a deal. Now, here's how the company's lawyer, meaning Johnson & Johnson's lawyer, described the decision. We are taking these actions to bring certainty to all parties involved in the cosmetic talc cases. While we continue to stand firmly behind the safety of our cosmetic talc products, we believe resolving this matter as quickly and efficiently as possible is in the best interest of the company and all stakeholders. On the flip side, however, the lawyers representing the women in these cases, they call this legal maneuver despicable. Here's in fact a statement from the CEO of the American Association for Justice, which is the group that is actually representing these plaintiffs. The Johnson & Johnson bankruptcy gimmick is as despicable as it is brazen and an unconscionable abuse of the legal system. In fact, the lawyers for the plaintiffs, they actually asked multiple judges to prevent Johnson & Johnson from executing this maneuver. However, they were all turned down. Now, in terms of the next steps in this case, Johnson & Johnson is working to negotiate a global settlement with all these women at once. Essentially, they are looking to have one global settlement instead of looking at thousands of individual lawsuits. They claim that this will not only guarantee that these women will get money, but also it will release Johnson & Johnson from any further liability. And if the two sides cannot find a sum that is mutually acceptable, well, then the bankruptcy could drag on for many years, and then afterwards, the women will probably be forced to take a smaller compensation payout since the company that they are now suing is technically bankrupt. And so, it's very likely astute legal maneuvers like this, as well as the FDA's willingness to approve the booster shots, that has Johnson & Johnson's stock price being about 14 points higher than it was a year ago. If you'd like to read more about this Texas legal loophole or about these baby powder cancer lawsuits in general, I'll throw those links into the description box below this video for you to check out. And all I ask in return is that you take a quick moment to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And now, before we move on over and discuss how the U.S. government is about to be spending $125 million to find new viruses around the world and then test whether they are infectious to humans or not, I would like to take a quick moment and introduce our sponsor for today's episode, and I will do so from the sound booth. That's right, Roman. The sponsor of today's episode is an awesome company called American Hartford Gold. As I'm sure you're aware, the rate of inflation right now in this country is accelerating like crazy. I mean, everything from the cost of lumber, cars, houses, food, gas, everything is increasing at an accelerated pace. However, in my opinion, what the most amazing aspect of the system is that you can take this money, which I actually think is as fake as monopoly money because the Fed and the Treasury just print this out of nothing, and you can use it to buy real money from American Hartford Gold, which is gold and silver coinage. Take a look. This is a box that I get every single month from American Hartford Gold sent to me because I believe it's a great hedge against inflation. This is something that has had value for 5,000 years. It's had value across the world in Russia, China, America, India. I mean, this is the real stuff right here. This is a beautiful, actually Canadian maple. And this is right here is some silver coinage. I don't know if you can see how shiny and beautiful it is. Yeah, but I just get these every single month because I believe that unfortunately the US dollar will eventually fall as the global reserve currency, as sad as that is. And I just want to hedge against those people in Washington, D.C. continuously printing our prosperity into oblivion. And I would highly recommend that you do the same. Go on over to the website for American Hartford Gold and consider doing business with them. They're an awesome company. They sponsor a program like ours, so they obviously care about the truth getting out there, but they also have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have a great customer support staff when you call them. They're super friendly, and they make the entire process super simple because not only can you get these packages here delivered directly to your doorstep, but you can call them up and set it up so that you can actually get gold and silver directly deposited into your IRA account, again, making it all super simple. And right now they're offering a special to viewers of Facts Matter, where depending on how much you buy, how much gold and silver you buy, they will throw in $1,500 worth of free silver on your first order. So give them a call at 866-242-2352 or text Roman to 65532. Also, I'll throw a link to their website down in the description box below. And American Hartford Gold, thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. And now let's move on over and talk about viruses. Now, if you've been paying attention to the information that's been coming out about the virus research that was being funded by the US government and then being conducted over in China, then you might have one of two different thoughts on the matter. One is that you might think that we should stop doing this type of research altogether since it's dangerous and that since it might have led to the global pandemic that we saw in the year 2020. The second option is that you believe that we should actually be funding more of this type of research, that we should spend more money doing virus research in places like China, with the thinking being that this can help to prevent future outbreaks. And it's this second school of thought that the Biden administration appears to fall into. That's because it was just announced earlier this month that the Biden administration's U.S. Agency for International Development, they have launched a new $125 million project alongside the Washington State University as well as about a dozen other countries to discover over 10,000 novel viruses in nature. Let me just repeat that. Similar to how the U.S. government funded the EcoHealth Alliance and then their partner, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it was just announced that they are also launching a new $125 million project in order to discover over 10,000 novel viruses in nature. Here's how an associate professor at the Washington State University described the thinking behind this new project. To make sure the world is better prepared for these infectious disease events, which are likely to happen more frequently as wild areas become increasingly fragmented, we need to be ready. We will work to not only detect viruses, but also build capacity in other countries so the United States can collaborate with them in carrying out this important work. Now, in terms of how this research is actually going to be conducted, the announcement from the university laid out a fairly ambitious plan. Here's what they said the goal of the project will be, quote, to collect over 800,000 samples in the 5 years of the project, most of which will come from wildlife. Then, to detect whether viruses from the target families are present in the samples. When those are found, the researchers will determine the zoonotic potential of the viruses or the ability to transfer from animals to humans. And in terms of the expected results, they believe that they'll find approximately 10,000 new viruses. Here's what they wrote. Quote, this process is expected to yield 8,000 to 12,000 novel viruses, which researchers will then screen and sequence the genomes of the ones that pose the most risk to animal and human health. And then, in terms of the actual methodology, Washington State University said that they will be partnering with many different countries, although they didn't exactly elaborate which countries. Here's what they wrote. Quote, the project plans to partner with up to 12 targeted countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America to carry out large-scale animal surveillance programs within their own countries, safely using their own laboratory facilities. What could possibly go wrong with that? If you'd like to read more about this statement for yourself, including the funding as well as the methodology of the research, I'll throw all that into the description box below this video for you to check out. And actually, on a side note, I would love to know your thoughts about this as well. Do you think that this is a good idea? Getting ahead of any possible outbreaks, is that the way to go by actually going out there and collecting these samples for testing? Or do you think that it's exactly this type of research that sparked the 2020 outbreak in the first place? I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave your comments in the comment section below and I'll read them later. And by the way, if you haven't already, also smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And now let's move on over and talk about New York, where the inevitable has finally happened. 2 days ago, New York City's Public Design Commission, they unanimously voted to remove a nearly 200-year-old statue of Thomas Jefferson from City Hall. Now, Thomas Jefferson, who was, of course, the prime author of the Declaration of Independence, who was America's first Secretary of State, and who was America's third president, holding that position, by the way, for 2 whole terms, well, he has now been officially canceled. And in terms of why they are making this decision, well, here's a statement from the New York City Council's Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus. This administration owes it to the more than 5 million New Yorkers of color that our members, past, present, and future, represent to resolve that the individuals memorialized within the confines of our people's house be reflective not only of the best traditions of our city's history and its diversity, but unquestionable character. Unquestionable character. Well, that is a very high bar to reach. Now, the reactions to this decision, as you might expect, were mixed. For instance, a New York City assemblyman who attempted to remove the statue all the way back in 2001, he said this: how the heck can people see as a hero someone who had hundreds of enslaved Africans, someone who was a racist and who said we were inferior? For him to be canonized in a statue is incredible, incredibly racist. On the flip side, however, many people are upset over the decision to remove such a historic statue, which has been standing there for 188 years. For instance, here's what Curtis Sliva, who is the founder of the Guardian Angels, as well as current mayoral candidate, here's what he said about it. Do we wipe out the images, the markings, and the names of all those great patriots because they were slaveholders, and slaveholding was quite common at that time? Now, to give you a bit of background on this statue itself, it was commissioned all the way back in 1833 by a Jewish Navy Commodore named Uriah Levy in order to celebrate Thomas Jefferson's promotion of religious liberty. Here's what Mr. Levy said all the way back then. I consider Thomas Jefferson to be one of the greatest men in history, the author of the Declaration of Independence and an absolute Democrat. He serves as an inspiration to millions of Americans. Now, in terms of what will happen to the statue itself moving forward, well, a spokesman for the mayor, he said that the city will actually retain ownership of it and use it for historical purposes. The city would still own the plaster model, and the Historical Society would include it in educational exhibits and provide valuable historical context. More specifically, as reported by a local ABC affiliate here in New York, the statue, which dates back to 1833, was expected to go on long-term loan to the New York Historical Society by the end of the year, where it would be included in educational exhibits with the proper historical context that likely will include discussions of Jefferson's slave ownership. If you'd like to read more about this decision to remove the statue of Thomas Jefferson from New York City Hall, I'll throw a link to it. It'll be right there in the description box below. And all I ask in return is that if you haven't already, take a quick moment to smash that like button so the YouTube algorithm will be forced to share this video out to potentially thousands of more people, letting the truth be known far and wide. And now let's move on over to San Francisco. As you likely already know, the city of San Francisco, much like the city of New York, has implemented a citywide vaccine mandate, meaning that if you'd like to go into an establishment like a gym or a restaurant, well, you need to show your papers indicating that you are vaccinated. And while most businesses are going along with this mandate and checking people's papers, other businesses are saying that it's none of their business. And one of those restaurants is called InNOut. It's a burger joint that has over 358 locations across the western part of the United States, and it's owned by a woman named Lindsay Snyder, who is a devout Christian, and in fact, she sometimes puts little Bible verses on the bottom of the milkshake and soda cups. And 4 days ago, her restaurant in San Francisco, it was temporarily shut down because she was refusing to check people's vaccination status. Here's how the situation played out as reported by Fox News. The San Francisco Department of Public Health closed the Fisherman's Wharf InNOut location on October the 14th after the popular burger joint did not check the vaccination status of customers, which violates an August mandate from the city requiring indoor diners to show proof of vaccination. Now, what is interesting to note is that the restaurant did post signs of the government's vaccine requirements on their windows and their doors, but they refused to enforce them. They said that they are a private business and they are not the vaccine police. Here's in fact a statement from InNOut's chief legal and business officer. Our store properly and clearly posted signage to communicate local vaccination requirements. After closing our restaurant, local regulators informed us that our restaurant associates must actively intervene by demanding proof of vaccination and photo identification from every customer, then act as enforcement personnel by barring entry for any customer without proper documentation. We refuse to become the vaccination police for any government. She then further slammed the city for this mandate and added that it's unreasonable, invasive, and unsafe to have the restaurant segregate their customers. Here's what she said. We fiercely disagree with any government dictate that forces a private company to discriminate against customers who choose to patronize their business. This is clear governmental overreach and is intrusive, improper, and defensive. Now, reportedly, this location has reopened, although they no longer offer indoor dining. And frankly, based on what we're seeing play out across this entire country, I suspect that the line to this restaurant will be out the door in order to have people patronize a business that is willing to stand up to vaccine mandates. If you'd like to read more about what's happening with this InNOut franchise over in San Francisco, I'll throw a link to that into the description box below this video for you to check out. Now, since you've completed this episode of Facts Matter, I would highly recommend that you go on over to Epoch TV and check out an awesome episode of American Thought Leaders where Jan sat down with Victor David Hanson and discussed how progressive elites, tribalism, as well as globalization are destroying the very idea of America. Here's a trailer for that awesome episode.
A very dangerous pre-civilizational pathology is tribalism. The idea that you identify with the person who has superficial affinities with you, i.e. appearance, or skin color, or hair color, or eye color, or linguistic commonalities. So I hire my first cousin and not the other person who's better qualified because he's part of the tribe. We've gone back in a retrograde fashion to a pre-civilization mentality.
Today I sit down with classicist and historian Victor Davis Hanson to discuss his latest book, The Dying Citizen: How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek.
If you want to check out that awesome episode as well as all the other phenomenal content over on Epoch TV, I'll throw a link to it. It'll be right there at the top of the description box. I hope you click on it. I hope you check it out. I hope you subscribe. And I hope that you join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful, beautiful world through honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. Also, consider hitting that notification bell so you can actually be notified of any new videos as we release them. And lastly, if you have an Instagram account, consider following me at Epoch Times Roman. I publish behind-the-scenes research as well as spicy memes. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.